Hello there and welcome back to Dukascopy TV. I'm Natalie MacDonald. Joining me now is Jean-Pierre Diserens, who is the co-founder of the Convention of Independent Financial Advisors. Jean-Pierre, thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you to Dukascopy to keep inviting me. I hope I can bring you some interesting things today.
Well, it's always a pleasure to hear from you. And today we're going to be talking about a recent forum that took place in Monaco. Now, firstly, can you tell us what new trends in financial advice became apparent at the forum?
There is a significant new trends that are driven by regulation, especially in Europe. You've heard about all these ridiculous new regulations that Mr. Barnier has introduced in favor of consumer protection. Now, the direct effect of this consumer protection is that since 2009, we have 150,000 independent financial advisors less in the market, which means that the lower segment of those people who require independent financial advice and are the least able to pay heavy dues and fees to have independent advice have been cut out of the market.
Now, I know that one of the key concerns almost that did crop up was this idea that whether or not central banks had created enough liquidity in this post-crisis era to actually prompt growth. My question to you would be, particularly in the wake of the ECB's big announcement last week, if not central bank action that we've seen thus far, then what is going to get growth going?
Well, if we look at liquidity, I like to look at the balance sheets of the large corporations, transnational corporations, who are crawling under liquidity. Now, if they don't have any liquidity, why is the ECB creating more liquidity? Because this liquidity is going directly to the banks. It does not go into the real economy. If you look at the balance sheet, as I said, of all these large corporations, they have significant amount of liquidities and they do not expand. Why do they not expand? Because they have no visibility. And who is creating visibility? It's politics who create visibility so that you have the potential to invest, create jobs, because you know that by creating jobs, you will generate new profits. And as long as that visibility is not available, the large corporations will not invest. But the large corporations have all the liquidities they need, so do most small and medium enterprises.
Now, something which I know has been on CIFA's agenda are the Millennium Development Goals. We had a guest come into the studio recently here who said that the Millennium Development Goals are set to fail, essentially, and not really fulfill their aims. Would you agree with that?
Well, we have to look at things, first you try to set some goals, It's like when you set an ideal, it is not something you will reach, it's something you will tend to. And the positive thing, there's two aspects, of course. It's always easy to say things have failed. But we have to look at the context. And the MDGs were created mostly in the mid-90s. It was the idea of the Secretary General of the United Nations then, which was Kofi Annan. And the idea was to eradicate poverty, extreme poverty in the first step. Now, what was the context in the mid-90s? In the mid-90s, we had a pretty clear North-South split. It was that the North had the technology and the money, and the South was getting financial aid from the North to survive. What do we have today? Today, we have the North that is broke. There has been a technological transfer to the Far East. And more so, now we even have a technological return since 2005, so that the geopolitical situation has nothing to do anymore now with what it was in 1995. And on top of that, we had the financial crisis. We had numerous financial crises during that period. So that what has been said in 1995 is not applicable nowadays anymore. But to look at the positive aspect of things. If you want to get the world out of extreme poverty, you have to know what you're going to fight. You have to have structures who know where the problems are within the country. You have to have a knowledge of the elements that you're going to be taken care of. And that did not exist in 1995. And a huge work has been done to evaluate all these elements. So that I would say now, with a new paradigm in the financial and world financial systems, and the knowledge that the United Nations has acquired about where the problems are, we're much better equipped to have and set new goals that will express themselves not in MDGs, but in SDGs, which are Sustainable Development Goals.
Now, the last thing that I wanted to touch base with you today on was SME finance and investment. How does this lend itself to the present debate between the real economy and financial economy?
You know, the SME lending is, again, more something that is an excuse to justify the extra money printing by central banks, being aware that that extra money central printing goes to the financial system and goes to finance through the financial system the ever-growing deficit of the countries involved. You know, we have not seen any country reducing significantly its deficit. We express ourselves in percentage of GDP right now. Nobody puts real figures on the table. But once you put real figures on the table, you realize that there's not really any savings going on at governmental level, especially in the Western world. On top of that, we see that the liquidity creation globally, worldwide, you hear Mrs. Yellen saying, well, we're tapering. Okay, very nice tapering, 10 billion, 20, 15 billion less a month. But others are still creating liquidity. The Europeans are creating liquidity, the Swiss are creating liquidities, the Japanese are creating liquidities, everybody is creating liquidities. And if we look at the global figure, it's still about $200 billion of liquidity created every month. Now, if you tell me that's not enough, the SMEs would require how much? Very, very little. And SMEs are created by entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs have one advantage over everybody: they're creative. And you see all kinds of creative new ways of financing that are developing around the world that are not going through the banks. And this will probably be the new way SMEs are financing themselves. They're already having new tools. And whereas we know it has always been very difficult for SMEs to obtain bank credit, they're not getting more bank credit now than they got 15 years ago, but they became significantly more creative to get money.
Jean-Pierre, thank you so much for coming in today. Always a pleasure to have chats with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The Dukascopy TV team continues to bring you a huge variety of interviews, so do stay tuned. Goodbye for now.